Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Civvie Debrief. Again, my name is Jose Pila. I am your host, and I want to start off today with probably a very simple question, and it's why. And to me, that's why us, why Civvie Debrief, why me. Why would you choose to recommend this channel? Why would you choose to watch this, me talking to our guests, talking to you about, the topics that we talk about? Well, CVD Brief and All Access Broadcasting is trying to change or to shift that narrative that a lot of people have of veterans, or veterans have of themselves, so that we could start not only empowering them, but listening to those veteran stories and asking ourselves, how is it that we can either help or just expand that veteran story and share it with everyone else. And today we have a special guest, and we share a lot of things in common. Not only our background from Mexico. I was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco. Her family was born in Jalisco, or at least on her mother's side. And we were both in the military. The one thing that we do not share, and you'll find out, is I probably lack that certain perspective that you'll see. And without further ado, Cristina Bermudez, aka Tina Colada. Hey, welcome to Civvie Debrief.
Aloha, how are you?
Aloha. Good. I'm good.
Thank you for having me.
I don't know. Thank you for
Such an honor.
But like I was telling the audience, I do not share the women's perspective as a vet.
Yes.
I served in a unit that only males. So we'll get to touch on a little bit on that and your experience, on your military experience, and why you decided to go into the military, and how that experience shifted your life and how it is today. But tell us a little bit about you.
Aloha. So my name is Cristina Bermudez, and I grew up in San Fernando Valley, Silmar specifically. And I'm a veteran of the Navy. For 12 years I served. I did 8 years active duty, 4 years as a reservist, and it was truly life-changing. And initially I thought, I'm only going to do 4 years. I'm going to finish my contract. I'm going to pursue my education and everything's going to be great. And then something happened where something shifted in my mind, where I really began to adapt, and I loved many aspects of it. I felt like it changed me for the better, and I started wanting to learn and grow more as a person.
Well, a little bit. Let's back up a little bit and see why. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, you grew up with a Hispanic background. Your parents were, from Mexico, immigrated from here. Why the military? It's big, the simple question that we were asking earlier.
Well, initially, honestly, it was for educational benefits. And I know that I shared that with several other classmates that were contemplating joining the military. And as you mentioned, I grew up in a family where my parents are immigrants, and they struggled. And I mean, until this day, they struggle. And it was very challenging for me to see that. And I am the eldest of 5, and I have 4 brothers. So it was something that I constantly wanted to remedy, and I wanted more for myself, to be able to be a positive influence and impact, not only in my household but in my community. And it was something that seemed like a challenge. But again, I felt so conflicted, because my family was like, you're a woman, no la vas a hacer, and it's going to be tough
you're not
on
gonna make
you.
it. Yeah.
You're not going to make it. You're going to struggle, and it's going to be tough on you. And to me, I said, well, more of a reason for me to join. And so that's sort of what made,
Catapulted you
yes,
into the military.
it definitely
It's a
propelled
challenge.
me in, and I'm glad I did, honestly.
Really?
I'm so grateful for that experience.
I know, growing up as in a Hispanic, also I'm an immigrant. I wasn't born here, but I can definitely relate to that aspect of my growing up in a low income family, and wanting to. I don't know if I did it for college. I wanted to get out of that lifestyle,
Right.
but I don't know how I would react if my parents would have told me, "¿Cómo la vas a hacer?" Like, how are you gonna make it? But being the only male in my family, it was like, okay, you're fine. That's what you want to do. Although it was very difficult for my family to accept, it was I don't know. I wouldn't be able to relate to that. So, like, tell us a little bit more about like how your parents reacted, and a little bit more about.
So my mom, I think, ironically, was a little bit more supportive, and I think because that motherly instinct,
that.
she knew my personality. She knew that I'm very strong-willed, and I was very independent. I think because I was the only female, I was like, I was the odd one out, and so I just always wanted to be a positive influence for my brothers, for my younger siblings, and I wanted more for myself. And I feel like my parents just worked so hard, and they, in our culture, I feel like, especially immigrants, they do what they have to do, not what they want to do. So, fast forward now, I'm like, I get to do what I want to do, fortunately.
Because of the struggle.
But yes, because I saw them struggle, but also they taught me, my values and my morals. All of that sort of set the foundation, and I think that's why I was able to have such a good or a positive experience in the military. It wasn't something that was foreign, having to step up to the plate and be in leadership positions, having to set the example for others. So I absolutely believe that the way my parents raised us has a lot to do with that, which is incredible because my father, his education, seventh grade. And, my mother was a lot more fortunate. She came to the US at 9 years old, and she went all the way up to high school. So it was two completely different perspectives, but to raise 5 children and, you know what I mean, to set that foundation for each of us, it was so valuable for me in the military.
Yeah, and you grew up here in California, right?
I
So
did.
it's that the Hispanic community, and that story that you're telling right now is very similar to a lot of vets coming out of LA.
Absolutely.
But what year did you join?
2003.
2003. So September 11 had already happened.
Yes, it had
And
just.
your parents knew you were
Yes,
going to war.
they did. But what's crazy is I don't think they understood, and I think
Also,
I don't think they understood the gravity of it. I don't think they understood exactly what I was getting myself into, and again, they didn't think I would go through with it. I think up until the day where I had to leave, I think they were still thinking she's going to come back. She's not going to go. She's not going to get on the plane because I had to go to Chicago. And, but I did. And I mean, but I honestly do feel that once I did leave, they felt she's going to be okay.
really?
So.
What gave them that reassurance, or what was it?
Well, I truly believe that they knew, the foundation, as I said, that they had, laid for us. And I really, my dad is, both of my parents are extremely hardworking, and just, they, I think more than anything, it was the mental strength more than anything. My dad was very firm, and in a good way. Obviously they meant well, and so that definitely helped me
Yeah.
in the military.
So you joined the military. They already know, maybe didn't quite understand what was going on, and I guess in foreign politics, but they knew you were strong-willed, and you were going to make it through. After you got to Chicago, and they realized that she's not turning
Yeah,
back.
she's gone.
She, for 12 years, what?
Yeah.
But so tell us about you're joining the military, which it's a very, very small percentage already. Small percentage of individuals that signed that paper to give their life for something greater than themselves. But it's an even smaller percentage for a female to do. How was that? Going into basic, going into your unit?
Not only as a female, but a female Latina, I was definitely outnumbered in every way. And I struggled with that initially too, but again, I felt like my dad specifically was the type of person that would always say, let your work ethic speak rather than you speak something. You know what I mean? When you say something, let your work ethic speak volumes.
Volumes.
And
more than anything, it's more than your gender, more than
yes,
your stature. Just makes you.
yes, because at the end of the day, it's those things that set us apart, regardless of our gender, of our race, of anything. And so I did. When I first went to boot camp, obviously there's a lot more women there. But once I was stationed on a ship shortly after, it was a crew of about 340 crew members, and out of those 340, it was only about 41 women. So, and again, very few Latinas. So I've mentioned to you that I speak Spanish, so I wasn't speaking Spanish. There was nobody to speak Spanish to, so just little things like that I had to adjust to and adapt to was definitely challenging.
And like I mentioned, my military service was devoid of, not that there wasn't any women around at any point, but in an infantry unit you don't see, at least in the time that I served, it wasn't anything that was, or any females in those type of units. So through this particular process of starting these podcasts, I've gotten to interview and to know female. My fiance is a female vet who's currently serving in the Air Force, and the stories that she tells me, and that I've heard from service members that are female, is mind-boggling to me. One of my very good friends, and she was also in the Navy, she would tell me that you get treated exactly the same, but there's certain things that you have to do on a ship that can only be done by. So tell me a little bit on your end.
Yes.
About those.
So I'm gonna tell you a story. So when I first, got onto the ship, I was lost because there's levels, and you go down a bunch of levels, you go up to the main deck, and I remember, we did our first deployment and we're out to sea. And if you've ever been on a cruise and you ever go outside, it's incredible. It's the clearest sky I had ever seen in my life, full of stars, and no light pollution anywhere. And I go up there and I just start crying because I hadn't seen daylight in like 3 days. You're down inside the ship, you're working. And sometimes, we would run drills, we would run firefighting drills, we would, in the middle, after our working hours. So we would work like 16, 17-hour days sometimes. And I 19, 20 years old at this time. You're a kid, and you're trying to process everything going on at the same time being homesick. I hadn't seen my family probably for a year at that point. And you're literally disconnected out in the middle of the ocean. I mean, back then there was no social media or anything like that. And
or Wi-Fi. I think that ships
yeah.
have Wi-Fi now.
Really?
I don't know.
No, they don't.
I'm pretty sure they do now. It's ridiculous.
No.
I know some private's gonna be like, I don't have Wi-Fi and crying about it. But
yeah,
sorry,
definitely none of that. And so I remember going up and sitting on the main deck, and I'm like, what did I get myself into? I was struggling. I was struggling with coping with everything that was going through my mind, questioning whether I made a good decision. And, but it was definitely challenging. And again, my particular department, my main team it was only about 7 of us, and I was the only female for a long time. So I definitely felt like I always had to prove myself a little more, but I had to shift that mindset real quick, because I'm like, no, we're all here, together for a common purpose, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. Whatever anybody has to say, I can't take it personal. I need to do my job, and that's that. There is no gender or any type of, there shouldn't be anyway. And so I always made it a point to never, victimize myself or feel inferior. And I mean, it's just a matter of perspective and really just pulling your weight and just doing your job. That's it.
honestly, and we talked about this earlier, that and I'll say it again. It's the seed of humility is vulnerability, and I'll tell you that after getting out of the military, it took me quite some time to accept not only the service of others that weren't grunts, or there weren't, and I know that I was completely wrong, but it took me a while to accept the service of females, and because I had a very, very narrow mind as to what service meant, and I thought that if you didn't see combat, if you didn't see hear bullets flying all over your face or cracking right next to you, your service didn't count. And oh man, boy, was I wrong. And listening to stories like yours, and the reason why I mention it is because there was a night I was on one of the deployments that I did into Afghanistan. I was on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and hating life. I had been walking for days. We were overwatching this particular area, and I remember that throughout the day, as we were walking, I was just hating life. But that night, at the top of that mountain, I looked up at the sky, and like you mentioned, there was no light pollution, no nothing like that. And till this day, it is one of the most beautiful skies I've ever seen. And I did tear up. And to hear that connection is I don't know, it's what makes vets. It's how. And you mentioned earlier, what you mentioned it when you and I were talking. It's what makes veterans easy to connect and easy to talk to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and but did you deploy into? Since I mentioned Afghanistan, you deployed into Afghanistan.
I did. Well, not Afghanistan. We did. We did go to the Gulf on the ship. I did 4 deployments. We did mainly Southeast Asia. We did go near Africa, near Djibouti, and So I did. I mean, I personally feel that if we had the option, and if that opportunity presented itself, absolutely, I wouldn't think twice of being in combat if I had to. I think the simple fact that I was willing, and I've mentioned this to people, the simple fact that you're willing to take that risk, because it can happen whether you're in combat or not. You're still at risk. You're still at imminent danger, but the fact that you're willing to sacrifice so many commodities, and you're willing to sacrifice time away from your family, all of those things, I think people underestimate the value of those things, and how the level of commitment that you have to make when you sign those papers and when you're serving. And because even when you're serving, you could potentially get discharged for whatever reason, but again, it's a commitment that not many people are willing to make.
Less than 5% of the U.S. population, and it's even lower, like I mentioned, for females.
Right.
And you're right; it is a huge commitment to give up not only seeing your family, but you are giving up your comforts. So, yeah, it is tough.
It is. And it's funny because a lot of my friends, especially female friends, they don't understand, and they ask me so many questions, and I try to answer as best as I can, but it's hard to explain unless you've served. And people associate the military with war and battles, and in my mind, and sometimes I do vocalize it, and I said, honestly, sometimes the war and the battles are within ourselves. And I feel like that's not just in the military. Yeah. Like, we deal with these daily battles with trying to figure things out, but I feel that that's across the board, just as humans. And so to add that additional layer, from your military experience, is just sort of magnifies it all. So it's.
And you know what? Talking about those daily battles, and we talked about it before the show, and it's that struggle, or that trying to find that I guess acceptance. Because we talked about like scenarios of being in a restaurant, and I've experienced it a couple of times with Amy, my fiance, where you're asking like, hey, do you guys give military discounts? And they immediately turn, in this example, they turn to me and they're like, oh, where did you serve? And I look at them and like, well, she asked you. She's a vet, trying to find that place and find that, have you gone through something similar? I know that you.
Absolutely. And more so because I am very feminine, and I do dress up, and all the time, I do sometimes ask for military discount, and they're
I
ask
all the time.
And so they're like, oh, well, is the military member here because you need their ID? And I'm like, I'm the military member. And they're like, you were in the military? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. And I'm like, no, it's okay. And they're like, honestly, don't take it the wrong way, but you just don't look like you'd be in the military. And I'm like, what am I supposed to look like? I don't get it. No. But
so probably some glossy Navy SEAL. You're supposed to look like some really glossy Navy SEAL that's been rubbing oil all over themselves for like days. And that is frustrating to. And that's one of the narratives that we're trying to shift. I mean, if you've been on this show, if you've been listening to this show, and you've been watching it, they come from veterans. We come from all walks of life, from the East Coast to the West Coast, from females to males, to all walks of life come, and it's very, very frustrating, and it angers me sometimes. I know that it angers a lot of vets, that you have to justify your service, or you have to I don't know, but hopefully we don't. With this is what we're trying to do. This is why we
Yes.
invite veterans, have them tell their stories, show the people, and especially the civilians, that there is not one mold for a vet.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it gets crazy. And a lot of the times, like we were mentioning earlier, these when we're living, trying to reconnect with civilization, trying to reconnect with civilians, we're going through our own struggles and missing what we used to do, missing that mission and purpose. And you mentioned it earlier that you miss it, which is why you joined the reserves. Not a very good idea, in my opinion. But tell us why. Why do you miss it?
I honestly, I do feel that camaraderie, that connection, because I did feel, as I mentioned, I was literally disconnected out on deployment on a ship. You're disconnected from the world and you adapt to this lifestyle, to, routine and a certain just level of trust, because you're with these people day in and day out. And when I got out, I mentioned to you that as a woman, because there weren't many women, it was hard to build those relationships, more so because you get transferred to a new unit and then you never see these people again. And back then, social media was non-existent, so I couldn't, find my friends on Facebook. And
MySpace. They had MySpace. They had MySpace.
Oh yeah, you're right. They had MySpace, but still, it was a lot more challenging. And but then you know that people are going to transfer, so you start kind of preparing yourself mentally, like, okay, my friend now is going to be transferred and I may not see her ever again, or maybe not for 5 more years from now. And so it was hard for me to make friends when I got out. I sort of felt disoriented. I'm like, I was still stuck on that routine mindset, and I was just craving those relationships, and that literally, were there every day.
But did you find that the reserves kind of scratched that itch of?
It did, but then it wasn't the same. You're right.
Why?
It wasn't the same because the structure wasn't the same, and you didn't see these people on a daily basis. For those that don't know, when you're a reservist, you only work 1 weekend each month, and so it's not, when you're active duty, you're every single day with these people. And so you build a team, and that's another thing is, regardless of my individual position, my individual job, the military will always be a team effort. You're never doing something alone. And at least I didn't see it that way. And any way that you could help, you obviously would be there, would be a part of the overall unit. And so I missed that. I felt so alone, and I'm like,
It reminds me of when you say that you're always doing something as a team. You're absolutely right. But there was a saying that one of my squad leaders used to say a long time ago. There's the right way, the wrong way, and the military way. Because there is a whole lot of standing around and trying to figure shit out. So it's like, how are we going to move this crate 2 inches to the right without disturbing the dirt underneath? It's like, what? Anyways, there's the right way, the wrong way, and the military way. And it was so frustrating. But that type of nonsense, I actually come to miss. Of, working as a team, even if you're working as a team in the wrong kind of way, you still figured shit out, or you failed as a team.
Exactly.
And it's one of the concepts that that I've seen in several positions that I've had as, in jobs that they fail to do. You
Absolutely.
either start talking about somebody else because you happen to envy their position, and you want to, there's always something. And like you mentioned earlier, you have to work as a team for one cause, and a lot of companies and organizations fail to do that, which is why I hope that the companies that are listening, or people that are listening, why hire vets? Because we know how to work as a team. We know how to bring a team
Exactly.
together, and we have one purpose, one mission, one goal, and that's what we strive to achieve.
Absolutely.
After that is achieved, we definitely start bickering amongst each other, but it just happens. But the other question that I wanted to ask is, what now? And it's tough for vets to come up with that particular answer, but a lot of us do know what is the next step for us, which for you was entrepreneurship.
Yes.
And you have your own company, which is where the Tina Colada comes in,
Yes.
which you have to tell us why Tina and Colada.
So I lived in Hawaii for 8 years, as I mentioned to you, and Hawaii definitely has a very special place in my heart. And I always say I grew up in Hawaii because I spent all of my 20s there.
Yeah.
All of my 20s I spent in Hawaii, and it taught me so much about myself. It taught me to slow down. It taught me to live a lot more simply. It taught me to really minimize my life in every aspect. And so that's part of the inspiration behind my company. But Tina Colada, I love anything tropical. I love pina coladas. I love pina coladas. And so instead of naming it Pina or Pina Colada, my name is Christina, so I shortened it Tina and Tina Colada. So that's where that came from.
It's clever. It is. I mean, but what is
So,
your company? I'm sure a lot of our guests already know your company
yes.
is.
So it's a swimwear brand, and the foundation for it and the main purpose behind it is for it to be a platform where we discuss inclusivity, diversity, body positivity, and self image above everything else. I feel that as women, particularly, we struggle a lot more, or at least we vocalize it more than men do. But I think to a certain extent, as human beings, we struggle with accepting ourselves. And as I mentioned earlier, those daily battles of, the world is already so convoluted as it is, and we're convoluted ourselves with our thoughts, and our mindset is everything. And I struggled with that myself, with self-image, with body image, and it got to a point where I finally just had this epiphany of look in the mirror, and that in itself is, it's sort of this weight off your shoulder where you finally come to terms with everything. And so I felt so strongly about that particular topic of body positivity and self-image. And it's not an easy topic to discuss
I
at
know,
all.
I told you earlier that I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit, and one, because to me, body positivity, I have it, to when I hear it, I immediately think, accept yourself how you are. Is that what the brand is?
Yes,
True.
it is accept yourself how you are, but it's also let's work towards a better version of yourself.
Okay.
And with that, I try to focus more on shifting your mindset and shifting your perception towards that whole idea, that whole topic of body positivity, of body image, and really asking yourself why you feel that way. Really, as I mentioned, holding yourself accountable for the way you think, and allowing yourself to be open to ideas on and concepts on how to change that in a positive way.
Yeah,
So
and it might be just my a bit of ignorance on my part, but yeah, when I think about that, it's for some reason I get this feeling of stagnation. Like, accept how you are. You're not going to change. This is what things are going to be like. Um, but to me, I completely agree with you that you have to first accept your current situation in order for you to change it. Um, and change to me is growth. That's why,
absolutely.
yeah, when you mentioned it and we were talking on the phone the other day, I wanted to ask that, like, what is body positivity to you? But you're absolutely right. It should always be growth.
Yes.
And I like that. So,
Yes, and I actually hosted an event when I initially launched my business, and it was titled Growth Mindset Progress Over Perfection. So it's a process. You're stuck with yourself the rest of your life. You better start liking yourself. And again, I come from a place where I struggled with that, and I had to really reprogram and rewire my mind and really focus on the big picture. And that has been the biggest challenge for me, and it was the hardest thing to do, and it took me many years, which is why I had never started my company before. I mean, I've had this idea, and I think about this all the time, because I kept thinking about my own struggles, and how can I, does anybody care about, am I the only crazy one? Like, and
yes.
so I learned through speaking to other women, and particularly my close circle of friends, that I would see and hear they struggle with the same thing. So I said, okay, this is something we need to really talk about.
So,
And
sorry, how would you battle the image that social media portrays for especially women? These models that are coming up on social media constantly, and so how does your company plan to target or overcome those particular images that?
so that is something that obviously I did think about. And so I do most of my photo shoots. So I style and I do the photography, and I don't Photoshop my images. And I pick women of all sizes, all colors, anyone is welcome to model. If you're, but the thing is, and you mentioned, how do you battle it? You bring to your team people that are already there, because everyone is in a different stage of that process.
Yeah.
Everyone's in a different stage of their life in terms of accepting themselves and still working towards a better version of themselves. So you bring in and you surround yourself with people that are already there, that can continue helping other women. And I think for me, that's what's worked best, is I share my story, and I love asking about everyone else's story, because I think a lot of people forget how similar the things we struggle with are. And that's how you connect. You connect through struggle. You connect through the same things that you're feeling but are afraid or embarrassed to share. And so that's really why I'm like, we need to talk about this. This
Well,
needs to be
it's
talked
you know what
about.
it's and it's a good segue to. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but I do see.
No.
I know, but I do see the synergy that I mean, all access broadcasting has, because of amplifying that voice. That's exactly what you're trying to do, trying to amplify the voice of the normal women that wants to feel better about themselves or feel good in their own skin. Trying to amplify that voice, trying to change the narrative, like Civvie Debrief is trying to do with the veteran story. So I definitely see, and this is exactly why we welcomed you to the show.
Thank you.
But now that we're closing, I would like to give you the floor, and if you have a Facebook, a Instagram, share with our guest or our audience. And
Yes, so you can find me personally at underscore Christina underscore Bermudez, and also on Facebook, Christina Bermudez. And my business is at Tina Colada Boutique on Instagram and on Facebook.
Don't forget your
Oh,
expo and
yes.
your.
So I'm really excited. This summer, July 18th, we will be hosting our very first fashion show, and it will be women of all sizes, all colors, all body types, and I am truly honored and excited for that. And so stay tuned. That's all that information is on my Instagram, and that's the Women's Empowerment Expo is hosting, and I'm personally hosting the fashion show. So I'm extremely excited about
Oh,
that.
we are excited, and we're going to try to sell you tickets.
Thank you.
But thank you so much for being our guest today. You're welcome anytime. So if
Thank
you
you.
want
I
to
can't wait to
come
be
talk,
back.
yeah.
Yes.
But and for our audience, please follow All Access Broadcasting on our Facebook, our Instagram, All Access Broadcasting, our all social media platforms, our YouTube channel at Civvie Debrief, All Access Broadcasting, Civvie Debrief. And what I wanted to mention to end the show is for the veterans that are watching the show, or if you have a family member that's a veteran or a friend that's a veteran, have them watch the show. And one of the things that I shared earlier is the seed to humility is vulnerability. And this is exactly what the show wants to do. I'm going to open up myself on a lot of my stories, my struggles, and what I've been through, and share it with our veteran guests and with the civilians that are watching. And it is very, very difficult for me to be vulnerable, but I'm willing to do it for you, so that we start changing that veteran narrative, and we start telling our stories, because like we mentioned earlier today, we come from all walks of life, and our stories are unique and different, but it does connect us in different ways. So don't forget to watch us every Wednesday at 7 p.m. All Access Broadcasting, and see you next week.